Hello everyone, my name is Zenitsu and I'm back with another Digimon deck profile video. So today I'm going to be taking a look at EX07, and EX7 offers us lots of new and powerful tools in order to build and iterate on some new and existing decks. And today's deck I'm going to be taking a look at is going to be of the brand new archetype, Vortex Warriors. So there is a starter deck to coincide with this deck, and if you want, I do have a full separate video breaking down that starter deck and a good guide on how to upgrade and iterate that deck. So please feel free to refer to that video before coming here, because this is more of the in-depth breakdown as far as what we're going to be running in the deck at its max potential capacity in my personal perspective. So when it comes to Vortex Warriors, it does seem like it wants to be a mid-range deck, having a solid mix of aggro and control tools. So this is also just a classic green deck, so it's not really doing anything super special outside of the brand new Vortex mechanic compared to a lot of other green decks, because it is just focused around suspending Digimon down. It wants to suspend your Digimon down, obviously for some extra bonuses and benefits, because certain cards interact and want to be suspended, while also having the capability of suspending the opponent's Digimon down to try to bypass their defenses, or, well, just attack into them so you could trigger some of your other abilities. And because the mechanics of this deck are a little bit on the broader side, there is just a lot of potential both in archetype and out of archetype that we could use to further enhance what this deck is capable of. The biggest weakness of the deck, unfortunately, is the fact that it is a stack-based deck, which does come with its own levels of inconsistencies, on top of the fact that, like a lot of other green decks in the past, it's easy for the opponents to play around your strategy, because if you are trying to suspend the opponent's Digimon down and they're not giving you anything to suspend, then you're not really gaining any benefits because they're not giving you anything to suspend. So that also coincides with the fact that there's a lot of decks that can do damage out of nowhere, and that doesn't leave this deck in the best of spots to be able to try to defend against some of those style of decks, depending on what the matchup is. But that doesn't mean I don't think it's a fun, interesting, and somewhat powerful deck nonetheless. So as far as what is actually in the deck, let's just go over that, starting off with the Digitamas. So the Digitamas for this deck isn't something that's hard-locked and is very easily flexible, because there's just a lot of different things going on, so there's a lot of different Digitamas that we could utilize. If you want to use a card draw engine, you could. We do have Gummimon and Kokomon to help us facilitate that depending on what you're trying to focus on, but I'm just going to be running, for the sake of this deck, 4 copies of the starter deck Fluffymon, just because I want to suspend cards down, and Fluffymon is just one of the easier ways for this deck to suspend cards down. Then, when it comes to the rookies, I'm going to be running mostly in archetype cards. So I'm going to run 4 copies of the EX07 Terramon. So this is really good at just the overall tempo, so that way we could try to digivolve into our level 4s a little bit more efficiently, while also having a good inheritable ability that supports that offensive and defense possibility, because during all turns, when your Digimon deletes an opponent's Digimon by battle, which could be either us blocking or attacking into the opponent's Digimon, then we get to gain 1 memory, which could mess up the opponent's tempo or increase our own. Then I'm also going to be running 4 copies of the starter deck Terramon. So this is going to be the deck's dedicated searcher or digger, looking for our bird and avian traded Digimon, while also looking for our Vortex Warriors and Liberator traded cards as well. So the fact that it could potentially hit 2 targets is really good, on top of the fact that it has a pretty generic but decent inheritable ability at just some extra DP, which is also why I'm going to be running 2 copies of the promo Terramon for that consistency on having that inheritable, while also having a good on-play ability in of himself to be able to suspend one of the opponent's Digimon down, which we have lots of different ways to be able to utilize this. Then the last two rookies of the deck is going to be 2 copies of the starter deck 18 Muchomon. So this is just another card that's playing with the archetype, so it has the inheritable ability of piercing, so in case we don't have it off of our Tamers or other cards, this is an alternative way for us to gain it to deal damage when we're deleting the opponent's Digimon by battle. So that way we could apply as much pressure as possible, on top of the fact that its all turns ability makes this the primary card that wants to be suspended for the deck, because during all turns, once per turn, when an effect suspends this Digimon down, which we have multiple ways to do inside of the deck, one of our Digimon with Bird or Avian in its traits, or Vortex Warriors, gets plus 3000 DP until the end of the opponent's turn, making it that sticky DP increase to potentially make it harder for our opponents to deal with our Digimon. Then when it comes to the level 4s, I'm going to be running an all Galemon lineup just to keep things simple, and well, Galemon is actually one of the better cards for this deck, having lots of good native synergies. So I'm going to be running 3 copies of the promo Galemon, which is, in my perspective, arguably the worst Galemon, but it's still pretty decent at being a highly aggressive level 4 Digimon, because when we Digivolve into this, we get to suspend 1 Digimon down, then this Digimon gains plus 2000 DP until the end of the opponent's turn, giving it that sticky DP increasing again. Then, while we also have a Shoto Tamer on our field, this Digimon will also gain the piercing ability, so that way it can just swing at pretty decent numbers and potentially deal damage for deleting the opponent's Digimon. Then it also has that same inheritable ability on, just giving us some extra DP, which is what the 4 copies of the starter deck 18 Galemon is also doing, so we have lots of ways to make our Digimon as strong as possible. And I feel like the starter deck Galemon is arguably the best Galemon for this deck, not only because he has the Vortex ability native to him, so that way we have some different levels of aggression or control, but it also has a nice security ability, which the more of this card we have, the more likely the security ability can come up on, allowing us to play a Liberator traded card with a play cost of 4 or less from our hand or trash for free, which is really good because we have lots of different targets that we could use this with, being some of our level 4s, all of our level 3s, and our Tamers as well. Then when it comes to the last champion of the deck, that's going to go to 3 copies of the EX07 Galemon. So this Galemon is still a pretty decent card just because of the low play cost and the nice when Digivolving ability to set up our Tamer. And the cool thing that this card is doing compared to other Tamer setters is if we already have a Tamer set up, then it could still potentially play one. So it just adds more usability to what Tamer setters can do, while having that same inheritable ability as the EX7 Terramon, so that way, again, we could kind of mix and match our stack to try to make our Digimon as effective as possible. Then when it comes to the level 5s, I am playing it a little bit safe on the level 5 ratios. So I'm just going to be running a nice, well-rounded level 5 lineup, and I am going to be running a couple of off-archetype cards just because I think that's the 2 copies of Starter Deck 17 Rapidmon is just that good to not run. So it has a nice on-play and when Digivolving ability to just de-Digivolve one on one of the opponent's Digimon, which is insanely important, not only for just trying to disrupt the opponent, but to try to make their Digimon weaker so our effects are stronger. Then, if we also just so happen to have a Green Tamer in play, then until the end of the opponent's turn, this Digimon can't be deleted or returned to the hand or deck by the opponent's card effects, so it really limits what the opponent can do when we utilize this card. And the only unfortunate thing about this card is the fact that it is going to be a little bit more expensive because we're playing him out of archetype. But the plus side with his inheritable ability, on top of what he's doing natively, more than makes up for it because his inheritable states that during all turns, when this Digimon deletes an opponent's Digimon by battle and survives, we get to trash the top card of their security stack. Again, we could use this offensively and defensively, and this is just straight up better than piercing because the check against the opponent doesn't trigger their security effects. And we could stack this with piercing to deal even more damage. So the other level 5s I'm going to be running are going to be in Archetype, and I'm going to start with arguably the worst level 5 of the deck, and that's going to be the 2 copies of Grand Galemon. Don't get me wrong, he's still a great level 5, it's just compared to the other 2, he's a little bit on the lackluster side. He has the nice on-play and when Digivolving ability to suspend 1 Digimon down, could be ours, could be the opponent's. It just depends on the situation that we're in on what we're going to be suspending. Then if this Digimon is suspended by an effect, we get to play out a bird or avian traded Digimon with 3000 DP or less from our hand for free to use for whatever else we need it for. Then on top of that, he has a nice inheritable ability for our higher level Digimon to take advantage of, where during your turn, once per turn, when this Digimon attacks an opponent's Digimon, we get to unsuspend this Digimon, allowing us to even potentially multi-attack, which just applies that much more pressure against the opponent. And then the last ultimate of the deck is going to be arguably the best level 5 for the deck, and that's going to be the 4 copies of the EX07 Grand Galemon. So this card natively comes with the Vortex ability, which is already pretty good, while also having a nice when Digivolving ability that's doing something similar to what Rapidmon is doing, where we get to suspend 1 Digimon down. Then if we suspended one of our Digimon down, then this Digimon isn't affected by the opponent's Digimon effects until the end of their turn. So it just is more added protection, so our Digimon has a higher chance at survival, while also having that same inheritable ability as what we saw with the starter deck Grand Galemon, having the consistency on this ability to potentially multi-attack. And that leads us to the level 6s. So I'm going to be running 2 copies of the Mega Gargamon Ace from Starter Deck 17 as a really fantastic off-mega for this deck, because natively this deck actually doesn't have any Ace Digimon, so it could really catch the opponent off guard thinking that we wouldn't have one, and surprise, we do. So this Digimon is really strong in of himself because he has the blocker and reboot ability, so that way, again, like a lot of this deck, we have the offensive and defense potential, on top of the fact that he has 2 when Digivolving abilities. The first one is the big disruptive ability to suspend 2 of the opponent's Digimon or Tamers down, which is actually pretty important, and then 2 of their Digimon or Tamers can't unsuspend or Digivolve until the end of their turn, really locking them down and limiting their options. Then its second when Digivolving ability also comes with an end of attack ability that still only triggers once per turn, where we get to unsuspend this Digimon, so we could potentially multi-attack with this Digimon on the offense, or on the defense when we're blast Digivolving, we can unsuspend him to potentially block. And then as far as the level 6s we're going to be running in Archetype, I'm going to be playing 3 copies of the starter deck 18 Zephigamon, because compared to the EX7 one, this is clearly the stronger Zephica. So it natively has the Vortex mechanic, which is pretty decent in of itself, and it has a highly flexible when Digivolving ability to suspend any one Digimon down, and then we get to unsuspend any one Digimon. So we have lots of different ways that we could utilize this ability, but it pairs very nicely with his third ability, which is an all turns effect that happens once per turn, where when any Digimon unsuspends, for the turn, this Digimon isn't affected by the opponent's Digimon effects, and it also gains plus 3000 DP. So that's really decent at making sure that our Digimon is going to have as much protection as it can, while increasing its overall DP to make it that much harder for the opponents to deal with our Digimon. Then the last level 6 of the deck is going to be the 1 copy of EX07 Zephica, because it's still a good card being in Archetype and on brand. It's just obviously not as strong as the starter deck one, because the trade-offs are it has security attack +1 to go with its Vortex ability, so while its base stats are a little bit higher and it can hit a little bit harder, it is a little bit on the unsafe side because it doesn't gain that extra DP or native protections. So it does have a nice when Digivolving and when attacking ability that is not limited to once per turn, where we get to suspend one Digimon, and then if this effect suspends a Digimon, we get to return one of the opponent's suspended Digimon to the bottom of the deck. So it's basically the removal backbone Digimon for what this deck is trying to do, and you can kind of play around with the level 6 ratios to find what works for you. Then when it comes to the level 7s, you don't necessarily have to run a level 7, but you easily could, and I'm running one copy of Imperial Dramon Paladin Mode Ace because, well, it's just one of the best level 7s in the game currently. But if you wanted to run a Quartz Spawn, you could easily do so as well. They both have their own pros and cons depending on how the deck actually shapes up and the matchups that you're anticipating. Then when it comes to the Tamers, I'm just going to be running all Shotos. So I'm going to be running 2 copies of the starter deck Shoto because this is going to be the deck's dedicated memory setter. Then it also has a really good ability where during your turn, when any of your Digimon attacks the opponent's Digimon, by suspending this Tamer, we could change the attack to another one of the opponent's Digimon or even the player, so that way we could actually utilize Vortex as an alternative win condition, allowing us to change our targets. Then, on top of that, I'm going to be running 4 copies of the EX07 Shoto because this card is absolutely insane, because it's allowing us to easily just generically gain a memory as long as the opponent has a Digimon in play. Then it even has an end of your turn ability where by suspending this Tamer, one of our Digimon gains piercing and blocker until the end of the opponent's turn. And if it's a Vortex warrior, it also can unsuspend. So it's obviously meant to be able to have good offensive and defensive capabilities paired up with the Vortex ability. And then lastly, when it comes to the options, I'm going to be keeping it relatively simple and just running a consistency package between 3 copies of Green Memory Boost and 3 copies of Agility Training because they both dig for cards and they both also help with our overall tempo and efficiency on being able to play our cards. And then the last option of the deck is going to be the removal option, which is going to be 1 copy of Embrace because we still do need an option to be able to have an instance response to, because there's just a lot of protection for Digimon effects, but sometimes there could be a little loophole for options being perfectly viable to try to interact with the opponent's Digimon. And this card, for its cost, is actually a pretty decent removal ability to suspend one of the opponent's Digimon down, and then if this effect suspended your Digimon, we could return one of the opponent's suspended Digimon to the bottom of their deck, while also unsuspending one of our Digimon. So that way, ideally, we're going to use this to suspend our Digimon, bottom deck the opponent's, unsuspend ours, and then boom, we're good to go from there. And the security ability just returns one of the opponent's suspended Digimon to the bottom of their deck. And for the most part, that's pretty much it for my interpretation of the deck. And I think that it is a pretty fun deck to play around with because of all of the different mechanics that's going on. And it's not like the deck isn't without other cards that you could potentially use and think about to further enhance what the deck's overall strategy and gameplay is, just because we do have other birds and avian traded cards we could interact with. We do have a whole bunch of other cards to interact with suspending cards down, whether that's ours or the opponent's. Again, just depends on the direction that you want to take, while also having tons of other generically good green Digimon and Tamers to think about. And we do have various other tech cards and packages that we could think about running as well. And it's not like this deck isn't without any upgrades either, so we do know that in EX8 we are going to be getting some more direct support for what this deck is doing, but in the meantime we do at least have something like the Green Scramble card, which is just another good generic green card to look forward to further enhance what this deck is capable of in the future. So that's all I really have on this deck. Please feel free to tell me your thoughts about this deck down in the comments below. And if you found this video to be helpful and informative, make sure to leave a like and subscribe and ring that notification bell so you know when I either go live or my videos get uploaded next. And with that, I want to thank everyone for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.